Welcome to the Keiser Report. I'm Max Keiser. You know, Voltaire said that injustice, in the end, produces independence. Because, of course, it is injustice which sparks revolution. Stacey.
Max, first I want to welcome Her Majesty to our show.
Hello, Queen Lizzie.
Well, anyway, she, of course, is still on the throne because she has managed, or her predecessors have managed throughout the history, to just back away when the injustice gets too grave.
Yeah, they've dodged the revolution. They're good. You're good at dodging the people, aren't you, Queen?
But it is an injustice which people always rise up against, and this is a theme that you and I, of course, have highlighted over and over here on the Keiser Report. But I want to turn to, forget all the crashing markets and that kind of thing. I want to look at the injustice because at the root of it, that's what's going to cause the problems, the serious problems. And first, I want to look at this tweet from Ian Fraser, who said, guy who stole £3.50 case of water from Lidl jailed for 6 months, but 2 RBS bankers behind a £3 million fraud walk free. So he's talking about the Lidl case is from 2011, the riots, and a 23-year-old college student, a university student. He used the opportunity to steal a case of water, and he dumped it, of course, but because he didn't feel like carrying it, whatever. But he got 6 months. But last week, these 2 RBS bankers were let free on a £3 million fraud because judge takes pity on embarrassed RBS bankers who committed £3 million fraud. The 2 RBS bankers have walked away from a £3 million property fraud without having to complete jail time because the judge believes they have, quote, already suffered as they were embarrassed by the incident.
Revolution, your days are numbered, Queen. Well, a £3 million heist by 3 RBS bankers who stole the money. They don't argue the fact that they stole the money. The judge doesn't argue the fact they stole the money. The judge said, the court recognizes you stole £3 million, but the court feels that your embarrassment at having been discovered for your crime is sufficient penalty for your crime. Now, a couple of things. First of all, the reason why the judge would make that determination is because during the course of his day, he sees bankers at RBS, HSBC, Barclays, and Lloyds steal £300 million, £3 billion, £30 billion. So for this particular judge, stealing £3 million is like, oh, you got caught with a Twinkie on the way out of Tesco. Here's a slap on the wrist. Meanwhile, on the other side of town, where there is no justice, there are no judges that are not in the pocket of the banksters, not in the pocket of the city. They're in the pocket of the private prison operators who are looking for prisoners to exploit in their private prisons. You so much as fart in the wrong direction and you get a 20-year to life sentence. Why? Because you've got two-tier justice. Your kingdom's going down.
Well, listen, so the judge in this case was a woman, and she said, unlike the previous judge in the Little case, who actually identified the definition of looting and said, this is what you did, you looted. This is exactly what the RBS guys did, is they committed fraud, because basically they impersonated, they forged the signatures of some of their relatives and set up shell companies in order to put property loans through that they wouldn't have otherwise, as employees of the bank, been able to get themselves. So she says about them that along with the embarrassment they expressed, that is punishment enough. I accept that it was not your intention to cause loss to the bank. I accept you intended at all times for the money to be repaid and has been fortunate the bank has not suffered. I have no doubt that both of you have suffered in the time it has taken this to come out in court. Now, of course, but this is how the global financial crash was treated as well, is that, the embarrassment of this crash, it's so embarrassing. Your Christmas bonuses were low this year relative to last year. Everybody's mocking you. They're bashing banksters. We know this is hard and distressing. And remember all those articles at the time of the financial crash that all these bankers were having to visit psychiatrists to deal with the emotional turmoil. Well, this is how they were treated then.
And also dominatrix. The dominatrix business was huge during the crash. All these bankers going to get spanky spanked by the dominatrix because they felt oh so hurt by the money that they lost everybody. It pains them inside when they blow through billions of pounds worth of the public's trust to make their yacht payment. And going forward, I think this idea of 2 sets of laws, one for the corrupt bankers who have the favor of the Queen, and everyone else who's not really a part of the Queen's court gets thrown into the gutter, can only lead, as you point out in the introduction there, as Voltaire indicated many moons ago, you're setting the stage for insurrection.
Now, we'll continue here on the UK and the National Health Service, which, of course, all of the parties are trying to privatize, and they want to bring in the U.S. system. In fact, they're bringing in a lot of the U.S. Healthcare providers and insurance companies at the moment. They're already here. It might not be fully obvious, but this is kind of a weird headline because couple funded lavish lifestyle in 7-year, £1 million NHS fraud. A couple who defrauded the National Health Service of up to £1 million to sustain a lavish globetrotting lifestyle have been jailed. John Lee, 54, and Deborah Hancock, 45, supplied equipment and services to the NHS at exorbitant prices. So that's all the U.S. is. It's the same exact service. You get a heart attack, they provide heart surgery, open heart surgery. You get cancer, they give you chemo or radiation, except for they charge you 3 times as much there. And this is the system they want to bring here. But they seem offended that these normal plebeians outside of the, the elite class, the police discovered some of the profits were used to buy an apartment in Dubai, a cottage in Windermere, a brand new Jaguar convertible, and a Mercedes, which looks exactly like Avon, Connecticut, or Farmington, Connecticut, right outside the insurance capital of America, Hartford. All these guys are living the exact same lifestyle.
You can't say the word plebeian or pleb.
Yeah. Oh, yes, that's true.
You can't use the word pleb in this country. That's this country's N-word.
We don't want to start.
You can get, like that guy Mitchell. He got tossed out of government because he used the P word, pleb. You can say it in America, but it would be the equivalent of somebody using the N-word against somebody on the street in America. They'd find themselves in hot water. But here, the N-word's okay, but it's the P word, pleb. Why is it so much? Because it highlights the fact that you've got vicious class war.
Well, the interesting thing is, okay, we've discussed over and over here on the Keiser report as well, the privatization of the NHS and what that will lead to. And the police sergeant, woman whose name is Laura Walters, what she said about this couple who were charging exorbitant fees to the NHS. This is a system they want to bring in officially. Now, this is what she says about their crime. She said, I also want to stress this is by no means a victimless crime. It is the NHS. They scammed out of thousands of pounds, money which the NHS badly needs for the treatment of people with genuine illness. Every penny they plundered is money that was diverted away from someone in desperate need of medical treatment. I am delighted this case has finally been conducted and these con artists have been exposed and brought to justice. However, when this is officially brought in and it's no longer a crime to deny people treatment that are seriously ill,
right,
that becomes justice in their injustice to the people, but officially justice.
Yeah, they need to decriminalize medical fraud in order to bring in the reforms to the NHS that Cameron and his crew want to do. In order for that work, they need to decriminalize medical fraud. Because as right now, there's someone got caught up as a medical fraudster. They need to decriminalize that.
So the system, the government of David Cameron wants to bring in right now.
They do.
Here, the sergeant, the policewoman is saying that this is not a victimless crime, that you're charging these exorbitant fees.
Not under the current legal system.
Not under
They need to decriminalize it.
Yeah, exactly.
To make it legal to commit medical fraud.
For certain people, these plebeians won't be able to, the plebs won't be able to do it. Only the certain elite will be able to do it. Only the sanctioned by the government.
Decriminalizing medical fraud.
That monopolies handed to these people.
They have a license to commit medical fraud.
Yes.
Given to them by the government. That's what they need to be change. Otherwise, they'll get caught up in a legal action.
So, again, speaking of police, I'm going to turn to the United States. Again, this is a story that we've covered, and this is an ongoing story. The Washington Post covered that the civil forfeiture, how the U.S. Police departments have been funding themselves quite lavishly. Kind of like this couple here that were living lavish lifestyles based on overcharging the NHS. Well, in the United States, the police departments have been able to say, basically accuse you of a crime, take all your stuff, and never actually charge you with a crime. You never go to court, but you have to try to fight to get your property back. Well, D.C. police plan for future seizure proceeds years in advance in city budget documents. D.C. police have made plans for millions of dollars in anticipated proceeds from future civil seizures of cash and property, even though federal guidelines say agencies may not commit to such spending in advance, documents show. The city's proposed budget and financial plan for fiscal 2015 includes about $2.7 million for the District Police Department's Special Purposes Fund through 2018. So they're already planning on stealing $2.7 million from you, whether or not you committed a crime.
Right. Well, you can create civil forfeiture obligation bonds based on the civil forfeiture that you'll be committing in the future. And Goldman Sachs or JP Morgan will give you that, was it $2.5 million?
$2.7 million.
$2.7 million you anticipate. So you can float those bonds in the market, but get 20 to 40 million for those bonds because people can use that as collateral to put together a portfolio of collateralized bonds, and you can build up a huge multi-billion-dollar business on future civil forfeitures right now if you just go forward to Goldman or JP Morgan and get paid today.
Now, of course, this was part of the problem, the nickel and diming of the people outside of the elite, those who are given state monopolies to commit the crimes, like overcharging for hospital services. In Ferguson, for example, Missouri, where we've seen riots happen, that population has been nickeled and dimed by dubious charges like running through red lights or turning right on red when they're not supposed to or whatever. But here in Washington, D.C., what they highlight about the civil forfeiture is that since 2009, D.C. officers have made more than 12,000 seizures under city and federal laws, according to records. Half of more than the $5.5 million in cash seizures were $141 or less, with more than 1,000 for less than $20. So, of course, those are the people that you're never going to go through the legal process to get that back because those are too small amounts. If they took $100,000 from you, it's going to take you years to get it back, but you're still going to fight for it. For $20, you're not going to. $141, you're not to. So they're nickel and diming literally people to death.
Yeah, it's highly efficient looting of the public. And those Ferguson protests, I noticed, are going over the Atlantic and appearing at the American Embassy in London.
Yeah, they were right after it about a week ago.
Which is not too far from Buckingham Palace. So you've got your friends in Ferguson, Missouri to visit you near the Buck House because you've instigated a global insurrection against banker occupation, old Lizzie, old gal. That pink dress will soon be in flames. Well, we got to go.
Bye-bye, Lizzie.
Bye-bye. Stay tuned for the second half. A whole lot more. Welcome back to the Keiser Report. I'm Max Keiser. Hey, we're going to talk again with Chris Powell of GATA, the Gold Antitrust Action Committee. So hot, so good. We got to do 2 helpings. Chris, welcome back to the Keiser Report.
Thank you, Max.
All right, super. So, Chris Powell of GATA, we left it off with currency wars, and it seems that things are heating up in the global currency war because first you had, geopolitically, there's a lot of tension going on. East and West. You know, they are now, it seems like the East wants to become the dominant economy in the world with China, Russia, the BRICS so-called. And the West is getting quite nervous, and they're actually sending troops, they're sending ships, they're lining up, So how does gold fit into all this? Because it would appear at the moment as though the US dollar, which is a world reserve currency, of course, it's in a rally phase, and is that sustainable? Because it's broken out of a 10-year sideways move. It looks like it's set to race forward. What are your thoughts on that?
This is a political decision at the highest level of the planet, Max. The dollar is strong right now, but it's only because nobody pulls the plug. Any country with even a modest U.S. dollar foreign exchange surplus can pull the plug on the dollar simply by exchanging dollars for physical gold. There was a war game of the Defense Department at the Johns Hopkins University's Institute of Applied Sciences a few years ago. Jim Rickards participated in that war game. He played the Russian hand in that war game. He postulated that the Russians could basically control the world financial system if they simply would require gold in payment for their energy exports. That card is yet to be played.
Let me jump in here for a second. You say if they required gold in payment for their energy exports. It was recently reported that the dollar volume of Russia's gold exports recently, one recent month, was equivalent to the amount of gold that they imported. Haven't they, in fact, gone on to a de facto gold for energy repayment system right now?
Well, I don't know. Maybe they have under the table. I've read that you know, the Russian.
But if you look those two numbers up, they're equivalent. So isn't that saying, and by proxy, they haven't made that statement overtly?
Well, it's possible. All I know is that not only is gold the supreme weapon, it has been recognized by the United States government as the supreme weapon. There's some very interesting minutes of a meeting in Secretary of State Henry Kissinger's office in April 1974 with his deputy for economic affairs, Thomas O. Enders. And Enders explains to him that the United States has to keep discouraging the Europeans from obtaining gold reserves and using gold in the financial system because, he said, whoever has the most gold controls what he calls the reserve-creating instrument and can create money and control all currency values. Kissinger replies, well, if the Europeans get in our way on gold, we'll smash them. Well, you know, gold is the reserve-creating instrument. It is the ultimate money. It controls the value of currencies and government bonds, and whoever has the most of it is going to make the rules. Well, I think the Russians know that. I think the Chinese know that, and I think they are aiming to have more gold reserves than the United States and the European Central Bank. And when they do, they will tell us what currencies are worth.
Right. Okay, let's put the pin in that for a second and just kind of revisit some history here. So this role of gold as the ultimate, you know, currency going back thousands of years is well established. And up until the 1971 period in the U.S., gold still was instrumental and key role in global currency exchange. And then Nixon, to pay for the Vietnam War and his growth at home, the guns and butter strategy, had to close that gold window. We went on to a fiat currency system. And so this set the stage for actually making oil the kind of the reserve commodity that runs the world, the petrodollar, as it's called. Now, here we are, 2014, oil is getting smashed. Shale industry in America, shale and gas industry, which is only profitable with oil at $80 or above, all looks like it's being completely wiped out from moves from Saudi Arabia. Saudi Arabia is not supporting oil. So the price is going to a market price, it's crashing, and presumably to wipe out the U.S. shale industry, which was perceived as a competitor. Russia gets caught in the crosshairs between U.S., Saudi. Remember, Saudi Arabia promised John McCain he'd bomb Iran, and he never did. So the Saudis got into a tizzy. They said, okay, we're going to pull the support on oil. We're going to wipe you out, your shale industry, and they're going to do it. So caught in the middle is Russia, you know, the big oil exporter. Oil is getting crushed. Of course, it's priced. The ruble itself was also down simultaneously, so it's a bit of a wash. But nevertheless, the ruble's down, there's stress. Wouldn't it behoove the Russians at this point to simply say to all y'all out there, you know, can just jump in a lake. We're going to back part of our currency with gold. Wouldn't that just, as you point out, that would completely change the game board completely, right?
Well, if the Russian ruble was convertible into gold, it would certainly strengthen the ruble to some extent. But I don't think any government wants its currency convertible to gold anymore. That's a restraint on government. That's a limit on infinite money, at least infinite money domestically in the local economy. I think the Russians would do better if they simply required gold as payment or offered a discount to oil purchasers who paid in gold. Real metal is in short supply. You talk about infinite paper, and there is infinite paper, but every time you take a real metal ounce out of the system, you do enormous damage to the fractional reserve gold banking system. You do enormous damage to the financial institutions of the West. I think that's where the Russian leverage is. Now,
okay, to make that distinction, they can just simply require oil and gas to be paid for in gold.
But to offer a discount to those who pay in gold. I mean, they can require gold if they want to. That would be an even bigger blow to the
right.
Western
So you offer a
banking
discount,
system.
and it clearly puts gold back into the mix without actually having to go to a formal reserve backed in any way.
Right. It becomes a form of payment again. It's monetized by the Russian government taking it as payment.
Right. And let's talk about the industry itself and the gold market, of course, because the gold is something you pull out of the ground and it requires miners, and miners have costs. And it seems like gold right now is trading at a price below what the average cost to pull it out of the ground is. So we'll talk about that, because it seemed like we're going to lead to shortages at some point.
Yeah, we're in the West here. In the West, we believe in paper. In the East, they believe in real metal. If people want paper, if they want electrons in their bank statement, nobody needs real metal coming out of the ground. It's very possible now that the gold mining industry is just going to roll over and die. I mean, God knows the mining executives refuse to stand up for their companies. Yes, we are below the cost of production, not only for gold, but for silver. I think the only hope is that the East doesn't believe in paper. The East believes in real metal, and at some point, the metal that is supporting the fractional reserve gold banking system runs out, just as the metal ran out in the London gold pool in March 1968, and then you've got a transformation. Now, what will the status of the mines be on that day? They may all be in bankruptcy. Maybe the Western central banks and investment banks will have bought them, at distressed prices before they let the gold price.
So there's roughly, I think, 160,000 tons of gold above ground from mining going back thousands of years.
Well, that's an estimate.
It's an estimate, rough estimate. Yeah. But so in other words, if the mining industry just goes kaput, that's it. That's all the gold we have. It's that roughly that equivalent. We're not going to mine anymore. That's all the gold. It sounds like Bitcoin.
Well, the gold supply will come out of hiding at the right price, at a price where there are real gains to gold investors. Actual mining production, maybe 2,500 tons a year, does not have that great an influence on the price. However, if the Western central banks are really as short of gold, real metal, as we think they are because of their gold swaps and leases, then the withdrawal of production, that could have a big impact. And I don't think the Western central banks want the mining industry out of business. I'll be very surprised if they let the gold price stay below the cost of production for very long. But listen, you never know how desperate they are, Max.
Okay, let's talk about the 64,000 ounce question, which is deflation versus inflation. Because in the global bond market since especially 2008 crisis, there's been a highlight of the fact that banks' balance sheets are shattered, they're in tatters, and the central bank's been trying to pump them up. But the banks still don't lend money. They're holding it onto it to pay off. They're rolling their debt, the zombie banks. It's a plague of zombie banks around the world. And this is causing huge deflationary pressures around the world. And it's getting worse. So Europe is back in recession. Germany's close to recession. The global GDP is contracting. IMF is saying global growth is going down. So gold, of course, is associated with inflationary pressures. You got deflation in copper, you got prices in commodities all collapsing, oil's down. Except, as I've said, gold is usually associated with deflation. You would think it'd go down, except, of course, in an instance like in the U.S. where they had to shut everything down and revalue gold 50% higher. In other words, it came back in as a standard of measurement of currency and was used once again.
It came back in to help devalue the currency. And
they had to reprice that currency.
I think central banks are trying to devalue without letting people figure it out through a rising gold price. I think the gold price will be the last thing they let go. Now, obviously, there's too much debt in the world. Incomes cannot support debt. I mean, the real incomes in the United States have been going down for probably 20 years. So devaluing the debt, I think, is probably the objective of central banks. It certainly ought to be the objective of governments. But if people figure out what's going on, if they are allowed to see a rising gold price and realize that the currencies are being devalued, well, they're going to get out of the system. They're going to go into real assets. There'll be a hyperinflation, and the central banks don't want that either. What bothers me is they will not be candid with us about what's happening. They are trying to control in secret the value of all capital, labor, goods, and services in the world, rig the currency markets, rig the equity market, rig the bond markets, and leave our governments to do nothing but, regulate whether, we can buy liquor after 9 o'clock at night.
Right. So if the global derivatives market unwinds and it's worth, let's say, $700 or $800 trillion, and it loses $600 trillion or $700 trillion of value, there's still a few trillion that could go into gold, which the entire gold market is only let's call it 7 to 8 trillion. So even just 10% of that unwinding money goes into gold, gold doubles.
Well, the central banks can revalue gold any figure they want by announcing that they'll tender for it at a price, even a fantastic price.
All right, we got to go. Chris Powell, leave it there. Thanks so much for being, once again, on the Keiser Report.
Thank you, Max.
That's going to do it for this edition of the Keiser Report. With me, Max Keiser, and Stacey Herbert. I'd like to thank our guest, Chris Powell of GATA, the Gold Antitrust Action Committee. If you'd like to get in touch, tweet us at Keiser Report. Until next time, bye, y'all.